Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Strong Stoic Podcast. I am your host, Brandon Tumblin. Before I introduce my guest, allow me to announce that this podcast is part of the Walled Garden Podcast Network, which is a bunch of podcasts by similar contributors of similar quality, all part of the Walled Garden Philosophical Society. Check it out, thewalledgarden.com. We're just a bunch of philosophers and seekers of wisdom who are coming together to pursue everything this podcast pursues, with its truth, wisdom, virtue, and the divine. I'm a founding member of that community as a director, contributor, mentor, and philosopher. And I also love a lot of the people working there and that I get the privilege to work with. So please check that out at thewalledgarden.com. Also, a thank you to my supporters on Patreon. Consider becoming a supporter there if you're interested. And also consider joining my Telegram group chat where we discuss podcast, the ideas presented in the podcast episodes. Finally, my articles you can find on Medium and the Stoic Gym. Today I have the privilege of speaking with Juan Pérez. Juan is a business consultant focused on bringing ancient philosophy, particularly Stoicism, into the business workplace. He is also the host and creator of the podcast Estoicismo Practico, pardon my Spanish, amigos, which is a Spanish podcast on Stoic philosophy. Juan is also, like me, involved in the Walled Garden as a director and philosopher. So we've actually worked together on the Walled Garden, but never had a philosophical discussion. So this is actually our first, which I was really excited about. So in this episode, Juan and I discuss, language barriers in understanding philosophy, how to incorporate philosophy into business, and how to be a Stoic leader, and much, much more. So without further ado, please welcome Juan Pérez. Juan, thank you so much for joining me today, man. How's it going?
Thanks for having me. I'm great. How about you?
I'm doing good, man. I'm excited to talk with you. And I guess I got to introduce you a little bit from my perspective. You and I have worked together, actually. We're both working from an organizational perspective in the Walled Garden with the whole Walled Garden team. And we're both... I guess, let's say, into Stoicism quite a bit and into philosophy and into deep thinking. But we actually haven't spoke about that before, you and I.
Yeah.
So all of our conversations up until this point have been about how to organize the company or the organization that is and will be the Walled Garden. So I'm excited to actually sit down with you and talk about some philosophy for once. So maybe I'll just get you to start with explain a little bit about your podcast, and I'll note that it's in Spanish, and so maybe we can get into, I don't know, I guess what you think about that, obviously your Spanish is your main language, but I'm really interested in how language and philosophy and ideas can be translated between all these different languages, so I'll get you to start there.
Well, thank you, Brandon. Thanks for having me. Yeah, likewise, I'm really excited just to sit down and talk about philosophy for the next minutes. Everything we've done in the Walled Garden so far has been, as you said, organizational and mainly work. But I'm really excited about that as well. Things we're building right now are really, really exciting. And yeah, joining with philosophy, talking specifically about what we do on my podcast is called Stoicismo Practico, which is practical stoicism, if we want to translate it literally. And it's been a challenge in different concepts out of philosophy to get the feeling, get the meaning in Spanish that it's not as well explained as in English. You were telling me about in French. I don't know if that happens as well, but there are some particularities out of language that, depending also with the culture, depending also with the cultural background we're currently living, actually in Mexico, because I'm from Mexico. There's a lot of states, and the culture changes between states. Even language, sometimes one word means different from the northern part of Mexico to the southern part of Mexico. So when you get deep into philosophy, sometimes these concepts can be misunderstood. So in order to get into the real meaning behind, or at least what I get from that concept, we need a longer conversation. We need to really develop upon different subjects. We even have these meetings in my group every 15 days. We meet each Sunday. We talk. Even one time we went up for 1.5 hours only in one quote. understanding one quote, and it was in Spanish. Sometimes it's this Spanish from Spain, not like this Latin American translation. So even there, you have different concepts, different meanings out of words, and it's like an old Spanish because the quotes are really old, so they keep that old Spanish translation, and even it's closer Latin to Spanish. I personally prefer them in English because I believe sometimes concepts are broader and it can be discussed much greater. But yeah, that's what we do here in Mexico. I'm from Guadalajara, and we have this podcast for over 3 years right now, and I'm really excited to have this space with you because we have been we have the podcast on pause, so now doing this with you gets me the motivation to get it back on track.
Yeah, man. Hey, you absolutely should. I mean, I've always thought a lot about so you mentioned, which was interesting to me, that the English texts you actually prefer, and I suppose I've dabbled with other languages, and English, it tends to be less, what would you say, specific in some of the terms, and so it's a benefit and it's a drawback. It's a benefit because you can discuss, I guess, in more broad and even simpler terms a lot of these deep ideas, but it's a drawback because you don't have a specific word to really get down to the meaning of something. So it requires a lot of elaboration. But I've often thought about even the English translations from, say, Meditations or Letters from a Stoic. I mean, these languages it's been translated so many times. And I even think that the English, what would you say, English translations of these texts, you still need a lot of interpretation. And I would say that you need to read just a lot. So, like, okay, this is a great question. What do you think are some of the things that you do to work that out? You mentioned like longer discussion. So you have this idea that you're trying to explain in a language, and it's been, for lack of a better word, it's been bastardized, right? It's been translated so many times that it's starting to lose its meaning. And you mentioned that you need like just to elaborate on it a lot and have a big discussion on it to get to the real meaning of it. But how do you think people can really? Are there any other ways you think that you can gain like a deeper understanding of some of these ideas?
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the $1 million question, right? Because I don't know if there's like a way to actually embrace the meanings, embrace the concepts. Long discussions can help because you're exposed to other perspectives. In these meetups, I'm talking to you about, we have people even from Mexico, South America, even from Spain, and they have different perspectives out of a concept, out of a quote, out of a meaning, and it reflects like the different experiences people have. So I believe there's not one way to fully embrace something, but to get to expose to other perspective, to other opinions, and just get your perspective even broader, and also put it in practice. But what happens when you put it into practice, something you don't fully understand, and you just continue building on a misconception or a misunderstanding? But I believe, as in many concepts in philosophy, these quotes, these concepts, these tools are here with us to be questioned, to be discussed, to be put into practice, even if it's right or wrong, just to get the best out of it, right? But how do you get the deeper meaning? I believe it's sharing it. There's no other way. I believe if you just close yourself to the meaning and believe you're doing it the right way, maybe you don't get it. You won't get the full benefit out of it. But when you share it with others, you discuss it, you see it from another perspective, from another cultural background, it might enrich the whole meaning. So I believe the only way, well, not the only way, but maybe the best way is to share with others, to discuss. But like they do it, and the old Stoics did, and the old philosophers did, just to hang around and talk about ideas. I believe that's the best way to fully embrace it. What do you believe?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with you. I think the best way is to, even if you can get someone that understands these concepts on a deeper level. I mean, you and I have several friends that are very knowledgeable about Stoicism.
Yeah.
And Kai Whiting, for example, he's written a book. Simon Drew. We're very lucky, I think, that we know a lot of these very intelligent Stoic thinkers, and I think with that, you need the understanding that you can call people out on that as well. Like, you need to have that open discussion. That's really what the heart of philosophy is. The other thing that I've done personally, and I'd like to bounce this off you, is I think a lot of these times, because we're talking about ideas that, let's say, were initially discussed, say, by the Stoics, is some of that historical context can be very helpful as well. You start looking at Marcus Aurelius and like what he had to go through. I mean, I just recently tried to understand a sea shanty, which is like, the old Irish song, and the terms are really old, and like you have to go line by line and figure out what this specific word means, and it's catchy and you can sing it, but you have no idea what it means until you dig into the history of it. And I don't think that's the best way, because it takes a long time to dig into history. But I think for those that are, let's say, fans of history, it is a great avenue as well. But how do you conceptualize like historical context in some of these ideas?
Well, I believe that's the way, just to go back a bit and try to, and that's the magic word, I believe, try to understand, because I believe you don't fully understand, because we didn't live in that era. That's as simple as that. But then you get into other context, the cultural context, the historical context, and maybe the state of mind that person is writing or composing or whatever he or she does. But I believe it's a challenge, but I believe you have to connect it a lot with this creative nature, the pneuma that the Stoics used to call, about trying to get that creative force and not just try to understand, but try to connect it with something you believe in as well. So, because what other way there is? I mean, you cannot understand the things that somebody was put through. Let's say in the Second World War, right? About the, like Viktor Frankl. I was talking about Viktor Frankl in a workshop I did this morning, and I hope you never understand, and I never understand what he went through. But his writings, for example, you got to be also really good at expressing your ideas, in this case in writing, just to get a glimpse of the state of mind these people have. And in that case, okay, you understand what was going on in Germany and in that era, but you will never fully understand it. So here, what I want to get into is just try to understand, but get into that into that how do you call it, like into that approach. Like, I won't fully understand. I try to understand, and I connected with this creative force that invites me to understand it. And I believe this is what he tries to tell me, and I will put it into practice like this. But yeah, as you said, if you want to get into the history, and it will be a long time trying to understand it in one way, and for one point, and in another point of view also. You might get into some historical facts that are just perspective, are just opinions. So, I mean, you won't fully understand. And that's the thing about, that's what I like about this philosophy and others, is that just to embrace randomness and embrace what I think is going on, but be open to say, I might be wrong. Maybe Brandon is seeing it differently. He has a really valid point of view, and just to be humble about it. And I believe that's the way I like to get into deeper levels of understanding.
Yeah, I love that, man, because, the emphasis on try there is really what it's all about. This is something that I would say I struggle with quite a bit. And actually, Josh Bertolotti from In Search of Wisdom, he said this to me. He said, and I've read this before, this is an old idea, but wisdom is knowing, but it's also not knowing. Yeah. And I thought about that for a while, and I would change his words a little bit. I would say wisdom is knowing, and wisdom is also accepting that there are things that you can't know. And as someone who's trying to be I suppose, an intellectual, that's a very, very difficult thing for me to understand and accept. And, there's just at the end of the day, man, there's subjective experiences that you'll never be able to fully understand. And you can look at it and you can objectify it as much as you want, but until you've actually done that, until you've actually been through exactly what someone else has been through, there's no way you can understand really how they're feeling and what motivates them to action. And it's the old adage of you have to walk in someone's shoes for a while to even try and understand them. But if you want to really understand them, you have to walk their whole life in their shoes, and that's of course impossible.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting, man. Do you struggle with that personally? Like this, as someone, I suppose, looking for a bit of advice, do you struggle with that? Like when you're up against a topic that's really hard to understand and you're trying to understand it and process it, or even like someone else's subjective experience. How do you deal with that as someone who's always trying to pursue truth?
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I think that's a very human nature thing to have to experience that struggle. I mean, every day. Actually, I have here tattooed in my left arm, reignite, because it's something I must do every day. Right? You're not stoic one day and be stoic for the rest of your life. Something you gotta practice every day. So the struggle happens every day, and I'm aware of it, and I try to get back to basics. I mean. Just this thing about understanding perspective, and when I get into this, let's say a discussion, and I get this a lot I do corporate workshops about change management, and specifically in psychology, the psychological aspect of change, and the philosophy, and I'm getting into philosophy. I'm getting philosophy into this method, and sometimes I'm 31 years old, and I get managers that are 50, 60 years old, and some of them are like, who are you? Like, how do you dare telling me all of this? Because I've been in the industry for 30, 40 years, and you just been like 10. So what are you telling me this, and what do you think you know? And I say, and in the beginning, when I started this, I got frustrated because, okay, I'm putting my best effort in this. I really investigated. I've read a lot. I've been discussing with great intelligent people as the ones you called before, and I believe I can share value. But then I get entangled into that idea, and that's where frustration comes from, right? So I started to focus on what can I control, as Epictetus said in the Economy of Control, and I cannot. I get into this concept that is I can't control what I'm currently thinking and how I'm gonna respond. And I've seen when I act with humbleness, I get better results. And when I, for example, this particular example that happened with this particular manager, I said, you know what, you're right. How dare I? I don't have the experience you have, and I'm here to learn as well. So, what of all these topics you see right here? What are those things you don't agree? Oh, I don't agree on this one, this one, this one. Can you tell me why? I want to know more about it. I want to experience your point of view. I want to really know what's going on. And I asking these questions while all the group was silent, just like just looking at him, waiting to see what he will answer. And then he got the volume down because he was like, who are you? What are you doing this? What are you calling that? He got the volume down, and he was okay. Yeah, I see this like this. My opinion, and he started to speak that way. My opinion, and I said that's a great opinion, and that's really valid, and thank you for sharing. And just seeing that humbleness with people, and like don't act upon like I know everything, because I don't. I believe I know certain things, but I like to question myself also a lot, and to continue these conversations has helped me to introduce myself better with these older managers or more experienced managers, and generally with everyone, even in my personal life. I get into this. I see my tattoo. I reignite. Start again, and I keep asking myself, am I saying this the right way? Am I saying is this my experience? Are these my emotions responding, or is it or am I wrong here? Maybe I'm wrong. And also, it's a good exercise, I believe. But I also try not to entangle in that line of thought, because then you get into the other. You get indecisive. You get full of doubt, and not do the right actions. But just like for a couple of seconds, just to, okay, am I saying this the right way? Is there a valid point of view right there? Is there something I'm not seeing? And yeah, it's been just like this practice for me for the last 4 or 5 years, and I try to introduce it in every single aspect of my life. It's like the discipline equals freedom, Jocko Willink says in his book. So I just try to get into those thought patterns, and continue doing them.
Yeah, I share that struggle as a younger manager, I suppose you would say. And it's hard because when you're young and you're trying to gain confidence and trying to learn, it's hard to even consider something like humility, because it's almost like you need confidence first. And I think it's always a balancing act. I would say that I still do this now. I try and approach everything with humility, and try is the key word, because it's a practice, and I don't think I'm far from perfect at it. But one of the things that I've done that's interesting is sometimes I'm in a situation. Actually, I'm in this pretty often. um, where I've made a plan or I've done something, I've produced a product, and I will go into the environment to hear what everyone's thinking about it without them knowing that it was me that actually, produced the product. Or so and I'll go in and I'll just kind of lay low and I'll listen and I'll hear what people say. And people have a different way of presenting things when they don't know that the person is there and listening. And I'm not doing that because I want to like get them later, it's nothing like that. But very recently I did this and I said, oh, so what's your complaints? Like, what's going on here? And they said, well, this is messed up and that's screwed up over there. And I don't like how that's done. And once they got all the complaints out, I said, okay, that's great. I'm actually the guy who did all this. So everything you just said is my fault. And and then he kind of laughed and he got a little, oh. And I said, no. I said, I need to hear this. And I think the key thing is just dropping your ego.
Yeah.
It's just dropping your ego. And it's really hard to do. But my question to you is, do you think you can fake that? Do you think you can, let's say, appear humble to someone? Like, let's say you're a young guy and you're coming in with a big ego and you're trying to teach these. In your mind, you're like, oh, these guys are just older generation. They don't understand computers, but I'm going to pretend to be humble to kind of get to them a little bit. Is that something you think you can fake?
I think you can fake it until a certain point. I mean, you can fake it in like, I don't know, superficial conversation just to get something out of someone. But in a deeper level, if you want to build upon something, you want to build a career path out of it, there's going to be a certain point that it won't work. I believe that. I believe the humbleness and humility has to come from a very pure aspect, from a very, how do you call it, like this, yeah, this really pure state of humbleness. I don't believe, as I'm telling you this, I actually would change my mind. I believe you cannot act being humble. It might be like a manipulation technique, maybe. That might be like the way to perceive it when you try to act upon it. But I believe you cannot fake it. What do you think?
I think maybe for a very brief period of time, but if you're going to go down to, say, trade workers or anyone in the organization that's, say, on the hierarchy is lower than you, and if you don't value their job, if you don't genuinely value their job and their perspective, I don't think that you can go down and actually present yourself as someone that's being humble. And because people know that, like if you have interactions with people, it's very hard to fake authenticity. I mean, that's the definition of authenticity, right? And yeah, I think you can get away with it a little bit, but people are very attuned, I think, to how they're presenting, how you're presenting yourself. And no, I don't think you can fake it for very long periods of time. I don't know. Do you think people do? Have you seen anyone that's I've seen people get away with this for a little bit, but not long.
Yeah. Well, more about the faking to be humble. I believe it's just a pattern of lies that people get into, and it's just one of their lies, and it's about manipulation. I've known people that their main objective is like to escalate the faster way in the corporate ladder and to be someone really fast. But I don't see humbleness in that formula. They're more aggressive, like this shark mindset about winning and just to be like really focused and but I've not seen like this humbleness being faked. It's more like getting more confident and sometimes it gets you enemies because you're young and you want to push them over in the corporate world. But as I'm thinking, no, I haven't seen someone fake humbleness. Maybe they faked to appear dumb. It's one of the laws of power, like to appear to be dumber, like from your boss or someone in a higher rank. But I've seen that, but not humbleness, because I believe humbleness, and that's my perspective out of humbleness, is to try to understand, to make questions, to try to get knowledge out of everything, and to continually be asking and be of service and try to help. That's for me being humble in that situation. And I don't know, maybe I've not seen it the full way, but I believe they fake to appear dumber so they can get their opportunity to mess with the other one later.
Yeah.
But humbleness, I believe it's another thing, completely different.
But I think a lot of that disconnect between people of different jobs in a company, I think a lot of times it's just a difference of priorities and perspective. Like,
Yeah.
so if you're a manager, you can't be involved in all the details. You just don't have enough time. So humility in that case looks something like, okay, I have an employee that is doing this exact job 40 hours a week. This Jocko Willink would say, whoever's on the front line has the best perspective because they're on the front line. So when you talk to these people, and if let's say you're not humble, you may think that they're kind of dumb or stupid because they're bickering on about their specific role, but they're only seeing their specific role. Now, you as someone that's higher up, you might be able to say, okay, yes, that is, given your perspective, that's a valid complaint. However, what you're not seeing is that this is a drawback, or this is a compensation from something else in the organization where these things actually come together. And so, like, it's still a valid concern, but you're not getting the bigger picture. And so I think a disconnect a lot of times, just in general, it's like perspective, it's worldview, it's like what is my priority right now? If you're working on the floor, your priority might be to polish this piece of steel as best as you possibly can. That might be your priority. But if you're a manager, or if you're, say, someone else further down the line in sales, you have completely different priorities and different perspectives. And I think what humility looks like practically is recognizing that very thing. What do you think?
Exactly that. Actually, my very first module of my workshop on change management is exactly about that, about perspective, about having different departments, having different objectives, different urgencies, different kind of roles and responsibilities. And I put this example, a true life example. You have this department of operations, and they produce a certain type of product, and they want to produce higher levels of that product. Their goal is to have their capacity full and to produce a lot of products. But then finance want to cut costs. They want lower costs. They want higher return, want higher ROIs, return of investment. So you get. I saw this person in one of the companies I was giving this workshop, and he told me that he went into an expo, and he saw this really big machine that could help them produce higher levels of product. They have higher levels of production. So there was a big investment. So he goes to finance and says, hey, finance, I want to buy this machine because, and he didn't even finish the sentence, because if we get the machine, and no, there's no money. We cannot do that. We have to get more cash flow because our states, our result states has to be with more cash, and we cannot do it, period. And when I get into this conversation with the operations guy, he said, and this is the interesting part. You know what? The finance guy, he's a bad person because he doesn't understand, and he kept like categorizing and criticizing the point of view of finance because his particular perspective was about getting to more product to have a higher capacity. And I told him, have you tried to understand the other department, the finance guy in mine? And he said, no, because it's not valid. I mean, my goal is to produce more, and that's it. And have you thought about his goal? Well, it doesn't matter. And that's where it becomes interesting, because people getting just fixed upon his or her objective, goals, urgencies. And then I go to finance, and it's funny because they use exactly the same words, Brandon. It's like they don't understand. And I said, that is right. That's a problem, because you don't understand either way. So that you can finance, you have a whole process. Not because that day you saw a machine in the expo, that means we have the cash to pay it. You have to get a requirement. You have to go and ask for this validation. And also my goals is to have a higher return of cash this year. So no, the answer is no. So then when I got the opportunity to set them together and to respectfully share their point of view, we did this exercise about letting go some pattern of thoughts and emotions, and just to set them into the listening part, active listening part, doing the right questions, and they get the glimpse. They try to understand the other people, but in the end, we are individuals who are looking for our specific goals, right? So the discussion in the end was also, okay, what can we do? I need the machine. And then the other was, okay, what can we do? I cannot give you the money for the machine. And that's where the organization as a, or here we can put it also in this as a society, a level in society is, what's our goal? What's the goal of the company in the end? What's the vision of the company? To have higher capacity and to distribute products all over the country, or to have lower costs and to get more money to the shareholders. What's the vision? In that case, was to have a higher capacity. So okay, then production goal has a higher priority. That's also the magic word. Which one is priority? Aligned to the vision. And that was a case in the company, and we talk about this in our first model in the workshop, that it's all about perspective. It's all about people's priorities. But to be humble means to try to understand that everyone has their own thing going, their own problems, their own urgencies, and just to be open to the possibilities that maybe you might not be the one with the higher priority, and to be willing to play ball, to play with the team. There was also this other example, and it was a great example in another company which exports avocado here in Mexico to other parts of the world. And we were talking about priorities and what's the main vision, the main goal. And the main vision of that company was sales. It was to have higher sales each year. And then talking about priorities, talking about how do you call it, importance in a certain way from each of the departments. But just to see like which processes were in a higher priority. The ones from the I don't know if I'm using the correct words here in English, but the people from the field, the one that produced the avocado, they were just our department, which is called the field in Spanish, el campo. The field is the most important department of the company, because if we don't have avocado, we won't sell anything. And he was like really sure, and the guy from sales started laughing. And why are you laughing about? If I don't give you avocado, where are you gonna sell it? He says this, I'm gonna buy it somewhere else. If you don't give me avocado, I'm gonna go and buy it somewhere else, and then I won't sell it. So, and he was like, his mind was blown, because he was one of the person with the highest ego, because he truly believed that he was like the main department of the company. And when he heard that, if you don't give me the avocado I need, I will get it somewhere else. I will buy it from another producer. I don't need you. So yeah, it shakes things up. It shakes perspective. We're really an interesting discussions there.
Yeah, well, it's any relationship you have, period, is a negotiation. It's a constant negotiation. But there's a few things that I picked up on that I want to highlight. So one of the things that came to me was when you're talking about these people reconciling these different perspectives. Part of what you said there is that, well, you have to ask yourselves, what's the main priority? What's the biggest goal of the company? And so what you have, if you have a hierarchy of people, you have the main goal of the company, which could be something like become an international company, or get as many products as we can out into the world that benefit our customers, something like that. And then each individual role in that company has its own set of goals and priorities that are specific to their job, but that ultimately feed into the main goal of distributing products as much as possible. However, what makes this complicated is that a lot of these jobs in the structure are actually in opposition to each other. So there's this false dichotomy in a lot of companies, which is people have different departments, but generally speaking, you have commercial department, which bring in the money, and then you have, or finance, and then you have operations, which they say spend the money. And to me, that's a false dichotomy. Like, I get what they're saying, because operations, they, like, if you have to build a truck, you have to spend money for the parts, and then you build it, and that's something like operations or production, right? So they have to spend the money. However, it's a false dichotomy, because ultimately that is creating a product which is going to be sold by commercial. And so it's not helpful to say, okay, you guys make the money, you guys spend the money. It's like, no, you're all going towards this one main goal. And even though there's, let's say, tension and conflict amongst ourselves, we're all trying to go towards this one goal. And I mean, to put it simply, if operations were to have all control. They could spend as much money as they want. The company would go bankrupt,
Yeah.
right? They would have products, but maybe some of them would be garbage, or maybe the efficiency would go down, whatever would happen. At the same time, if commercial got their way and they didn't want to spend any money, they wouldn't be able to make any money. They wouldn't be able to spend any money. And so I think my opinion of human life in general is that human life, daily life, is full of tension. And a lot of times we mistake that tension for something bad.
Mm-hmm.
But it's actually, not all the time, but it can be beneficial if it steadies you and it's all oriented towards the same goal.
Yeah, completely agree. And that's the main thing to do first. It's what's the goal? What are we gonna do? What are we trying to do? Right? As a company, as a family, as a person. Because we also get this false dichotomies within ourselves, right? Because you get this thought about doing something, but then you act upon something completely different. And but I think that's one of the main things to do. Like, what's the goal? Where are we trying to go? Right? And there's also another aspect, Brandon, about getting into these agreements and sharing the vision, sharing the values, sharing the objectives, that it's really important in the formula. I was talking to you about organizational psychology and how it plays an important role in here. And it's understanding, try to understand the personalities, try to understand the ways people think, the ways people communicate. It's not the same in everyone. I use the Myers-Briggs theory about and I do this in every company I go into. We do this test, the 16 personalities test, and it's free online. And the more I use it, the more I interview people with these models of personality, I understand better the organizational culture and how they might respond and how they might, and this is the important part, how they might collaborate and share their vision or share the main vision with everyone else. So you get people like really analytical, really introverted, and really like close-minded, like more structured way. And then you have the completely opposite kind of personality, like the adventurous, innovative, conceptual, extroverted, more feeling kind of guy. And you sit them both in one room and chaos. So for instance, and that happens on an unconscious level, because you don't have like this banner of your personality all over, all around, and just try to how do you call it, to excuse your behavior out of, because that's the way I was born, and that's the way I was told to be. But it's a model of personality. And when you have a big mix and you put people that are not personality compatible at the beginning, you get a lot of frustration, you get a lot of misunderstandings, because you're speaking different languages, and work-wise or communication-wise. So that's another issue that we try to open. We actually map out personalities in organizations and say you have this kind of indicator, you're more introverted in here. And then you have, for example, in finance, because also I've seen personality gets you to the role. We have a lot of people in finance and administration that are more like, they're more structured in a way, but they're more closed to, they're not open to new possibilities, new processes. And then you have people in sales that are really extroverted, they want to do things really fast, and it's like a natural way of having these discussions and misunderstandings. So it's another way of perceiving it. And for example, in this first workshop, we do this personality test. We map out every personality. We use this. We practice the dichotomy of control, and we establish like, what's your goal? What's the goal of your department? What's your goal of your role in the organization? And then what's in your control? What's not in your control from other departments? And then try to embrace the full vision from the personality aspect. Like for this person, you gotta talk in numbers. You gotta talk fast. You gotta get to the point. Because if you talk about other things, you're more extroverted, you will lose that person, and he will be thinking, I'm losing my time with this guy. And the other way around, if you want to present something to someone important that is more extroverted, more emotional, you gotta ask him about his family first. You gotta ask him how he's doing. You gotta ask him about the game last night if he likes basketball, and then get into it. Because if you go straight to the facts, straight to the point, and A, B, C, D, he might look it as aggressive. And I've heard that conversation. He's really aggressive. I don't like talking to him. Why? Because his personality and his experience, his perspective overall, if you put all the variables together right there, he's the way he's used to have this conversation. So yeah, it's a big world trying to understand the organizational culture and people working in organizations, but it's a great challenge, and applying these Stoic concepts has helped me a lot to understand, to try to understand better myself from in that area, and also to the people participating in this change.
Yeah, well, and I think the antidote to that frustration is a realization that the frustration that you're having right now because of someone else's different personality, that ultimately benefits the higher goal.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you see this, okay, here's a great simple example in a relationship. In a relationship, you'll often have someone who is very structured and they need to, very punctual, they need to leave on time. I'm that person. I'm very frustrating to be with sometimes because I am very structured. And I know you're quite structured as well, in just from working with you on the walled garden. And then you have someone who's more open and they're not structured. And so when I want to leave at 7 p.m., the most frustrating thing for me is when someone's like, oh, no, but I want to go do this first. I want to do that. And then before you know it, it's like 9 p.m. and you're like, holy crap, like, I'm supposed to be going to bed now. Like, this isn't what we planned, right? The most frustrating thing ever. But what I need to realize, now there's a balance there. I think 2 hours is maybe a bit extreme late, but there needs to be a balance there. But ultimately, I need to understand that the openness and or rather the lack of structure that the other person has is actually a drawback to their strength of openness. And because they are open, they are able to see opportunities that I cannot see. They are able to be more creative in some ways as well. And ultimately, if I'm in a relationship with this person, or if I'm a coworker with this person, I have to understand that ultimately feeds the higher goal. In a relationship, the higher goal might be something like a good relationship, something like that. So even though I'm frustrated that you're making me late, I know that because you're making me late, that means that you have a different personality, which has a benefit that I'm not seeing in this very moment, but that I need to see overall. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely. And we get back to the main topic from today, right? Like trying to fully see the whole picture. That's the beauty of Stoicism in my perspective, that it allows you to try to see a bigger picture out of everything. And in this case, how do you call it, like this relationship. In the end, it's a relationship. What's the main goal? It's okay. I want to have a family, and if I want to have family, I have to be open to the possibility that sometimes things are not going to work out like I want them to. As I plan them out, maybe my wife in this case has a different perspective out of how to even wash dishes, to wash the dishes, right? So it might be completely different and irrelevant to my priorities, but okay, that's the way she sees it, and it's important to her, right? So I got to see the whole picture, to see it in a broader perspective, to be happy and not just to clutch upon the minimal things. And I've heard this not only at work, also in a personal level. Many fights come because of those minimal things that we want to control or we want to impose as the way of doing things, as the way of living. And that's that's what Stoicism has done to me. Like, okay, maybe it's not the way. You're living a different reality as my wife in this case is living. She has a certain way of doing things in the workplace. You see people with 30, 40 years of experience, and they have done things a certain way. And I wanted to say this when I got this idea, and I'm glad it came back. This great Stoic exercise about finding virtue in everything and in everyone, and everything you're currently doing. Even though, for as an example, you said that I like to have things planned out. I like to have a structure in my planning, and then you get off the track. So then, if in not the thing is not to come, not just to go with frustration, but to think about what virtue I'm gonna find in here, what good thing I'm gonna learn from this, and sometimes being open to creativity, or I don't know, something happens that I just say I'm glad we stayed here. I'm glad this happened, because if it wouldn't happen, then I won't be where I have to be, right? But to have like this, and it's the meaning of ataraxia, right? to let go of all those perturbance and just to be open to whatever may happen. But yeah, what do you think about that?
No, man, that's awesome. That's so good. Like you have to be open, and it's just so hard to do when you're in the middle of it, right? So that I find myself doing that frequently, and that's really I guess that really is the idea of the cosmos in Stoicism, right? The idea that okay, yeah, this is frustrating for me right now, but this serves something greater. And that really what you're doing there is you're opening your perspective to the bigger picture. In the Stoic case, it's the cosmos, it's the universe, it's everyone, it's shared humanity. And I think, yeah, I think it's just a matter of practice, man. I think, and when you get frustrated with something, you open your perspective, and that doesn't make it less frustrating. Sometimes in the middle of it, sometimes you're still frustrated, and you just gotta let that go. But at least it gives you the maybe just a little bit of energy to not I don't know, maybe not say something you regret, or maybe not do something you regret because you're frustrated in this moment, and just take a step back and realize that no, this benefits the big picture. I wanted to ask you about, I suppose, one of the things that I try and do. I shouldn't say I try and do it. It sort of happens inevitably due to my personality, but I bring philosophy into my work quite a bit. And I want to ask you about this because I've found, or I've presumed that it's not a good idea to go into a work environment and start talking about Marcus Aurelius. It's better to it's better to go in with an idea that you want to present or talk, but you don't come in and say, okay, this is actually a Stoic concept, like you and I would, right, in this conversation. Oh, the cosmos. Like, you're not thinking about the cosmos, Jonathan. Like, that doesn't work. But you have to sort of bring a concept in a way that's going to be received by the audience. So I'm curious how you do that. Like, when you first go to a company and your thing is Stoicism, right? Like, how do you what's the first steps? What's the warming up method for that?
Yeah, that's been a challenge for the last years because in the beginning, and that's like 6 or 5 years ago, when I started to introduce Stoicism in in the concepts in the company, I said, okay, this philosophy exists for more than 2,000 years, and how this philosophy can help you see a broader perspective and get people collaborating and stuff. And people in the beginning, companies in general, were really close to the idea of philosophy in general. They were, it's boring, it's old fashioned. How it would help me, and it was frustrating for me at the beginning because how it's the way, right? But it's one of the best ways to see it. And then I changed it to organizational psychology and how philosophy could change, could help. I'm sorry, could help, but it was still difficult to get people to even look at the word philosophy. I believe, well, at least here in Mexico, here in Guadalajara, which is the city I'm currently living in, there's a misconception about philosophy and the scope philosophy has. It's not only for discussing metaphysics and logic and be closed in a room and waste hours trying to fix the world, because they see it as a very old thing and a very boring way, and that's, here's the thing, they see it as a non-practical way. They think philosophy is just to have a discussion and that's it, right? So it was difficult at the beginning. Then I understood that it was not the way. So I changed it to change management, which is the certifications I have and the whole method, like the whole structure of how to introduce myself into companies. And then when we get into the method, we get into the models and everything we see, I start talking a little bit, just a little bit, a tiny thing about philosophy. But then it's all about communication, it's all about leadership, it's all about problem focus and problem solving and those kind of words. And also the return of investment, the how the projects we do, because we do agile projects to get into these organizational projects to have a better an impact, a benefit in the company. But then in the very first model, I open with this quote from Seneca, which is, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And then I just put it in my screen, and then I say to people, "What do you think about this?" And we get a long discussion, 15, 20, 30 minutes, about this quote about it's not how the first part, it's not pain, it's fear, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality. And it opens the possibility with people to talk about deeper concepts. And then I say, you know what, Seneca, and I start talking about Seneca, and this is Stoicism, and I start just like, and I say to them, this is not a philosophy class, it's not a history class, it's just I just want to share the main things with you. And this is a philosophy that started in Greece more than 2,000 years ago. Zeno and Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, Musonius, everybody in between. And just in 10, 15 minutes, I explain the philosophy, and then I get into the practical concepts. And I said, remember about this quote from Seneca, about how we suffer in imagination, because it's all about perspective. And then I started talking about perspective, about personalities, because everybody has their personality. And it's like, okay, the debater sees it this way, the executive sees this way, the commander sees this way. And then I ask questions, we put examples, I even tell jokes, and people get they start trusting the process. And some of them, let's say 20-25% out of a group, ask me later more about Stoicism. It's like, okay, that was something interesting. Where can I find more? And I say, okay, you want to get into the classics, you want something friendlier, what do you want? And then I start to introduce them a little by little to the Stoic concepts. And then we have 12 models out of this workshop. We begin with this Seneca quote and perspective, and then we get deeper into deeper. For example, you talk about the cosmos, and I present it as the view from above. And we do this exercise and try to minimize their problems, or minimize, for at least their reactions to these problems, seeing as a whole cosmos unity. But it's some conversations that are difficult and fragile for some people, and some religious folks here in Mexico as well. But I get good response in general. Out of 20 people, only one or two disagree or are more close-minded. And then in the last models, we talk about Memento mori, we talk about amor fati, and we have seen really good progress with people that are struggling with letting things go out of their control. So in the end, I believe we're making good progress, and I believe I found a way to introduce philosophy little by little in the company, in the entrepreneurial world, in this example.
Well, the crazy thing about reading something, I love that you start with a quote. I'm gonna steal that, because that's interesting that you throw a quote up on the board and people have an idea of what it means to them, right? And one of the things that, as soon as you read Marcus Aurelius, as soon as you open Meditations, one of the things you find is that a lot of his thoughts are not, they're timeless. Let's say it like that. They're timeless. They're not just in his time. They're things that have that people have been dealing with since we've been people. And so you throw a Seneca quote up there, and because these Stoics are so reflective, and a lot of them are, it's like a journaling process. Like, I mean, Marcus Aurelius was a journal, but even Seneca's writing, letters from a Stoic, even his writing is sort of like this internal reflection a lot of times. And so it really gets down into the mind of some of these people, and it makes it so that it's so easy to relate to once you open the book. And I find that's a great idea. Something else I wanted to point out is that bringing Memento mori into a workplace. When you first said that, I was like, man, that's challenging, right? Because it's a little bit morbid, right? It's like, all right, let's all gather around. Let's take a minute to remember that we're all going to die someday, and it's going to be okay. Let's just sit in this darkness for a while. So that's a hard thing to do, but I think it seeps its way in subtly to some companies. I've actually realized, when you were talking about that, is that at my company, I work with boats quite a bit, tugging barges. And when something goes wrong, if someone didn't get hurt, we'll always emphasize that. We'll say, okay, like something went wrong. Maybe a piece of equipment breaks. It's like, well, at least nobody got hurt. Mm-hmm. And really what you're saying when you say that is there are worse things that could happen. Someone could have died from this. Let's just take a moment. Let's remember that someone could have died, and that this tiny little thing that is just a bit of steel and wood, you know what? It's not that important. It's just a little bit of money. It's not someone's life. And so it's this practicing of perspective, memento mori. But I'd like to get you to expand on that a little bit. How do how do you first remind people that they're going to die? I mean, that's something that's really hard to do as a parent, as a friend, as anyone. But how do you do that in like a company situation?
Yeah, that's why I put it in the very last part of the models, like in the
Yeah.
session 11 or 12, because I just said that's the thing. It sweeps a little bit. It's like I don't know if it's the correct word, like you dosificate, you give small doses of the
Yeah.
philosophy, starting from a broader perspective, going from the dichotomy of control, taking another's perspective, a view from above, and all of these exercises and concepts. And then session 11 or 10, we've already been together for 30 hours. And I get them to listen to podcasts, and I get them to do some exercises. So they're more, let's say, familiarized with the philosophy in general. So when we get into that topic, it's not that how you call it, like
Yeah. It's a
this huge shock.
yeah. It's not an abrupt. Yeah. It's not a shock. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a great way of putting it. Yeah.
yeah, it's not that abrupt. But to answer your question, we start with some quotes. I believe it's one from Epictetus. I don't remember exactly which one was, but like, take the opportunity to kiss your family, your wife and kids, because someday you won't be here and they won't be here, or they won't be here. So I started with that quote. There's also another one from Marcus Aurelius. That I don't remember exactly the same phrasing, but it was something like that. Like, you get used to live your day as the very last. And I started with the cliches, pointing out the cliche, pointing out the cliche about what's the other one, also in Latin, about there's another phrase. Ah, okay, let's see if it gets back to me. But this phrase that everybody, carpe diem,
Oh, carpe diem. Yeah. Seize the day.
and seize the day. Yeah. So, and it says, yeah, it's very cliche. A lot of people talk about it, but then, unfortunately, from a point of view, COVID did a lot of messy things, and a lot of people died. And I know a lot of people that have suffered from, even from the illness, and that has lost people in the pandemic. So I started with that, sharing a personal experience about my father-in-law. Rest in peace. He died because of COVID, and I shared the experience about, he was well, and then in a matter of 1 week, he passed away. So, and then I had this. It was going to happen with my dad as well, and I was getting prepared. My brothers see it as something harsh and cold to do, but I was preparing myself for the worst thing that could happen. And I saw my dad, and I was like, okay, maybe I have a day or two more days with him. So why would I ask him? Why would I tell him? And then I connected with a sense of priorities, and not
Yes.
just to, maybe tomorrow he won't wake up. So what do I need to tell him right now? What do I have to ask him right now? And I get into that, in that position. But how do I put this concept with in companies? I share my experience first with them, and then every time at least one person shares his or her experience about. And it was one company that one girl started crying like a lot, and she was like, yeah, you never know. I had some issues with this coworker in the workplace, one coworker. We never figured it out. We were like really mad at each other because of something really stupid. And then he got into his truck, he went driving, and he crashed and he died. So she said, you never know. That's the thing, you never know. So tomorrow we might hear, tomorrow no. And then you lost the cliche with that, because you're sharing like really personal experiences, and we get it in this really safe zone. Everybody starts to speak out their hearts, and then I connected with, okay, priorities in your personal life and in the workplace. I mean, we don't have the whole time we believe we have. So what are we gonna do today? What are you gonna do this after this session? What are you gonna do? And like, people get all lit up, they get motivated, and they have really meaningful conversation with each other. And yeah, I've had some great feedback, which also motivates me to continue doing this. About, oh, it was not only about the workplace. Yeah, I talked with my manager, we figured some things out, but then I spoke with my brother, who I haven't spoken in years, and that concept about Memento mori, it really got to me. And yeah, so that's the way we do things in that, with that concept.
Hey, man, that was really, really well said. I think that's a great place to come to a close. Uh, Fittingly, because that's the last thing that you talk about with companies is, listen, guys, remember that you're going to die someday. See you later. But no, that was awesome, man. I mean, and so true, and I relate to that. I again, I'm not perfect at it, but every time I see a family member or someone I care about, I try and consider the possibility that that is the last time I see them. And, you know, and it makes you more prepared if you do lose them, but it also makes you a little bit happier while you're still here. You know, it makes you be a bit more grateful for them. So the only downside is that you have to bathe in that darkness for a little bit, but the benefits of it are huge, as Stoics would know. Listen, thank you so much for coming on with me, Juan. It was an absolute pleasure chatting with you. I'm gonna open it up to you to say where people can find you if they're interested. If there's any Spanish speakers out there, definitely check out your podcast. And any final words of wisdom you have.
Yeah, no, thank you, Brandon. Thank you for the space. I had a great time. And yeah, you can find me at Instagram at stoic.cm. That's stoic.cm. And my podcast is Estoicismo Practico, which is practical stoicism in Spanish. And final words of wisdom would be, oh man, I don't know, just to try to broaden up perspective, try to question yourself every time when you get frustrated. That's the final thing I want to share. I use it as a trigger concept. Whenever time I'm getting frustrated out of something, that's my way of physically knowing, okay, you're getting frustrated. Like, okay, and not to repress the emotion, just to question myself. What are you frustrating about? Well, why are you getting mad? Why are you getting sad? And try to conceptualize my feeling and get into the pattern of thought. And yeah, it's easier to say the being done, but it's about practice, as you said. So just keep practicing, keep questioning about different perspectives, and that your reality might not be, it's not the same reality as everyone else's. So yeah, that's it. Thanks so much, Brandon.
I love it, man. Until next time, buddy.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.